The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Sorry, you're too old. Sorry, you're too experienced. Sorry, but we're looking for someone younger who will stay with us longer are just some of the reasons employers use to overlook talented over 60 applicants, says Helen Hirsh Spence of Top 60 Over 60. The mission, according to the organization's website, is to provide tools and training to address ageism and promote age diversity in the workplace. Organizations that turn their back on workers over 60 are doing themselves a disservice, according to a Columbia University Mailman School of Public Health study. The study states older workers are skilled and experienced. They stay with jobs longer and they take fewer days off. They have a strong work ethic and they demonstrate that age-diverse workplaces make for the best teams. The study goes on to point out that older workers attract more business. Remarkably, in tourism, companies that employ workers that are older appeal to older tourists who have greater discretionary income. And the study points out the Upper West Side of New York Apple store strategically places older workers towards the front of the store so the customers who might be overwhelmed by technology can feel more comfortable. I invited Helen Hirsh Spence of Top 60 Over 60 to join me for a conversation that matters about the benefits to businesses that are age smart. Helen, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Stuart.
Is ageism in the workplace really a thing, or is it something that maybe a few people have experienced? I guess what I'm saying is, are we seeing discrimination against people who are over 60 in the workplace?
Yes, we are. We're seeing it all the time, all over the place. And I'd say unconsciously, we see a lot of it as well. So it's not just the lawsuits that are being brought forward. Those are obvious, but it's much more serious than that. It's a toxic workplace because of ageism.
Why do you think this is happening? Why is it that it's okay to target older people and say, nah, we don't have a space for you any longer?
Well, I don't think it is okay. And the truth of the matter is, I think that ageism is the last socially accepted ism. It's the only one that has been normalized. And probably it's because we haven't been exposed to courses and awareness about age diversity.
So tell me about
In other
age.
words, so let me explain a bit more. So age intersects with every different identity. I can be Black and I'll get old. I can be gay and I'll be old. It's the only factor that can be multi-perspectives, and yet it's ignored. All the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, 92%, according to research, don't include age, and that's worldwide. That's not Canada. But in Canada, it's the same. Whenever I try to reach out and talk about age diversity to somebody who maybe didn't solicit my input, they shy away from it because of the legal implications of ageism and how dramatic they are. Now, the same thing applies to, Black and Indigenous populations, yet we're very much more aware of that now. But age has been there forever, and I'd say it's one of those unconscious biases that most people have, but they don't recognize. And I can give you lots of examples too.
Well, the perception seems to be that, well, you're getting older, so you can't be as smart. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg has famously said, well, younger people are smarter, even though the evidence doesn't back that up. And so you have a social media giant like that that's pushing out this message. How much more difficult does it become to sort of overcome that kind of perception?
You identified probably one of the biggest black holes that have to do with age. I think everybody who's older or my generation has heard that quote and has internalized it. So that's what's referred to as internalized ageism or self-directed ageism. And that is probably one of the biggest problems, Stuart. So until I recognized what it was, I suffered from it too. And, I'd been a leader in a former career, and yet I lost my self-confidence. I felt like I was invisible. And all of that was because I had internalized messages such as, I'm too old to do that, or I can't use technology because I'm older, or, you can't teach old dogs new tricks, or he or she's over the hill. If you think about the number of expressions that we commonly use that are negative about getting older, and then add to that all the industries that survive on the notion that getting older is negative, such as, healthcare, beauty products, hair, nutrition, diets. There's so many industries that rely on me being afraid of getting older. It amounts to a lot in a lifetime. And so many people, without realizing it, have internalized the message, and it limits their own potential. So they don't even go after the jobs or go after, the volunteer positions or start something new because they really think that, in fact, they can't do it. So that's where a huge amount of work has to be done, because I would generalize to say that it's the older generation that perpetuates ageism without realizing it, because they have internalized those beliefs. They're not the only ones by any means, but if you don't recognize it in yourself, for instance, I hear people say regularly, "Oh, I'm having a senior's moment." And they think that it's funny or it's acceptable. Well, it's not, because once again, it's just those kinds of comments that reinforce the bias that we can't do something new.
I got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. You just touched on something that I find very interesting. I'll have people go, "Oh, well, I can't remember that. I guess it's a sign that I'm getting older." And I say to them, no, it's not a sign of that. All that is a sign that you haven't accessed that information in quite some time. Your brain is smart enough to say you don't need to have it there just like that, because you haven't accessed it. You haven't had a need for it. The brain still hangs on to it. It stores it away in a place. And then when you go to bring it up, you're expecting that you're going to have access to it in an instant, even though you haven't thought about it for more than 20 years. So here's the interesting thing about your brain, though. It goes, oh, now you want to figure this out. And you start going, what was that again? I know what it was. It has to do with this and that. And over time, which could be 5 minutes, it could be a couple of hours, your brain works its way through the neural pathways, finds that information, and eureka, there it is. It hadn't gone away. It was only the direct connection from your conscious mind to your stored memories that had become a little bit dormant. But that's not a sign of lack of ability. It's your brain saying, you got so much else in here that you need to access, and you've told me it has a higher priority. So I know that I've kind of jumped on to what you're saying, but I see people do it all the time, and then they start to convince themselves that they're in some kind of decline, when in fact they're not. Right. And not to be confused, I mean, there are some people who really are in decline, but that's an entirely different process. And so, yeah.
I just want to comment that what you're referring to is crystallized and fluid intelligence. According to the experts, the brain actually peaks at age 30 approximately. But in terms of, I would also use the analogy of a hard drive, it's full as you get older, and so it's harder to access some of the information that's in there. But you're right, you can recall it, and very often it's just, a few minutes later. But crystallized intelligence is something that you acquire over time that's really important. And it's just a different type of intelligence. We may process things a little bit more slowly sometimes, but we are just as capable. And they have found that that's true way into your 80s and 90s. So, we do not have to worry about cognitive decline. We can do a lot of things to avoid it. But one of those things has to do with staying engaged socially, using your mind, like learning something new, working as a group in which you can maintain cognitive awareness. And the other thing is thinking positively. They've actually been able to prove that having positive thoughts will not only lengthen your lifespan, but can also reverse the onset of dementia. That's a recent finding.
I did a really fascinating interview a number of years ago with a fellow by the name of Dr. Max Sanader, who started the Brain Research Center at UBC. And one of the things that he said is vitally important, in addition to what you were saying, is being socially engaged and don't smoke and watch your alcohol consumption and so on, but light, moderate exercise. And in particular, the use of light weights. And when you use light weights, you ignite the release of a cortisol that comes from your muscles. It's not the stress that can be detrimental to your brain from cortisol from your internal organs, and it helps to spur what's called brain-derived neurotropic function. And then he says the key is then go to work solving a problem. So you create new brain cells, then you go to work solving a problem, and those brain cells, the stickiness of them, they last for much longer than if you just don't do anything.
Well, I mean, you obviously know a lot about it, probably more than I do. But there's that Deutsch study book that came out about the elasticity of the brain. I mean, all of those new findings really support the fact that we can live longer and we can live better. I think the biggest issue has to do with our health span, which we don't talk about necessarily as much as our lifespan, but it has to match it in order for us to maximize what we can do. And there's, as you said, strength training is one of the best ways in which you can do that. But again, it doesn't have to be extreme. And if you work out just a bit, it will have a huge impact on your well-being, because a lot of people as they age lose their balance and so on. So this helps them maintain their ability to do a number of things. And unfortunately, I believe that we have a notion of getting older as being what it was in the last century, like grandma knitting in a rocking chair on the porch and grandpa sitting there smoking a cigar, not a cigar, but a pipe, and that is an antiquated notion. I mean, we are living 100 years now. My grandchildren will have an average age of 100. That means average. And young people who are in their 20s and 30s today are going to be working into their 70s and 80s, but it's going to look differently. It's not going to just be learn, earn, retire. It's going to be learn throughout your life, never retire, because you can change the way, and we can do that right now, but there aren't enough people who are aware of the possibilities, and they're denying themselves that potential.
This is our second break. We'll be back in a moment. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So, does the change have to start actually with those of us who are north of 60 right now, so that we are helping to share that message that says, no, you're not done just because you turned 60. You have to accept it before you can demonstrate that to younger people who aren't as aware.
Yeah, that's critical. I think having been in education, I think the best way to educate people is to role model what walk the talk. And that's the reason why I named this Top 60 Over 60. I'm still looking for somebody to collaborate or sponsor an event with a symposium. We need role models, everyday people, not millionaires like we have with other competitions. We need people I guess like myself, who's no celebrity, to show that, you can still do things and highlight that. I'm so tired of hearing about 40 under 40. Although I've worked with young people my entire life. I love them. I believe in age equity. I don't believe in sacrificing one generation for another. We all should be in solidly together, because if you're lucky, and we can get rid of ageism, it will help you in the future, because it's really a discrimination against your future self.
So here's one of the other interesting bits of information that I picked up while I was preparing for our interview. By next year, the portion of the population that's over 60 will be larger than the portion of the population that's under 25. And with that...
Are you taught where, in Canada or worldwide?
In North America, in Canada and the United States. And then take into account the falling birth rate. The next generation behind the ones that are coming into their 20s right now are having even fewer children. And so that causes a huge amount of HR or personnel challenges for businesses. If they in their mind think, oh no, I can't hire somebody because they're older, well then they're really going to have trouble with the supply of workers.
And that's why I've been reaching out to businesses and companies and talking to them and speaking, at conferences about that. You're talking about succession planning, you're talking about talent management, and more importantly, you're letting institutional knowledge walk out the door when you don't retain some of these people. And so you can be a CEO, but there may be another function that you can perform in a different role whereby you share that knowledge. So I really think that what I refer to as setting up programs that are like reciprocal mentoring programs would be beneficial. And that's one of the things I would strongly recommend. But there's so much that we're losing by letting people go early. And as you said, I don't know if it was you who said it, I was talking to somebody else earlier, older people cost so much more. Well, they don't. When you actually figure in the cost of recruiting, of training somebody, and then trying to retain them, when we know for a fact that younger people tend to move around more and older adults are loyal and committed because they grew up in an environment where that was the norm. Even though I don't blame the young people at all for moving around, they don't have the benefit perhaps that I experienced with pensions, or they're not treated as well by companies either, because of this, chicken and egg situation that has to do with retention. So in the end, hiring somebody who's older or more experienced or more mature, whatever you want to call it, sometimes pays off in a big way.
So for top 60, over 60, you in essence are a toolkit that employers can use to address issues related to ageism. What will somebody who visits the site get from that visit?
Well, I hope they'll get in touch, because it's about consulting. So it's really a niche consultancy. But because of COVID and because of the need, and as things happen, I do a lot more than just that. I have programming for older adults to help them really overcome their self-directed ageism. I also have programs to introduce the entrepreneurial mindset, which is useful for anybody and everybody. It's like a growth mindset with competencies that everybody can use, such as creativity.
Third and final break. We'll be right back. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. So you talk about entrepreneurial mindset. Mm-hmm. The evidence suggests that people who are older, who start businesses, are actually more successful because, they, oddly enough, think slower and therefore make more measured decisions. They have patience, determination, and a long-term view, and they know how to solve problems.
I mean, what you're saying substantiates it is substantiated in all the research. The Irvin Kaufman Foundation in the States has written about how over 50-year-olds are twice as likely to be successful in entrepreneurial activity than a 30-year-old. And it makes total sense. We've got networks. Sometimes we do have funding, but we have all the life experience, expertise, skills, knowledge that accrues over time. That's one of the things that I don't think people can understand. Unless you've lived, you can't have experienced certain things. You could have experienced other things. So there's a lot to say for life experience that's being dismissed in the workforce and everywhere and anywhere. Yeah, I firmly believe we should be having entrepreneurial programs. I'm just writing a piece about that now for older people, because we're primed for something like that. And it doesn't have to be a full-time job. You can do it to the extent that you want. It could be like what I'm doing, a passion project, supplementing income, but it's not, it doesn't have to be for the same thing. What is significant, and the one thing that we haven't mentioned, is that we all need to have a purpose. And if we don't have a purpose, it can be a big P or a little p. A little p is, really mostly caring for oneself. But the bigger P has to do with purpose for others, that'll benefit others. And that has to do with, the stage of life that we're in, and that is generativity, according to, Erickson's or Maslow, or the different layers of, aging and getting on and so on, self-actualization and generativity. So get older to figure out what it is we want to do with the rest of our life, especially since our life is longer now than it's ever been before. And people haven't figured that out. Therefore, their savings necessarily don't amount to what they should or need to be later in life. There's so many issues around living longer that haven't been attended to, and they're not just financial. So people work, a lot of people return to work after they're retired, not because they need to, but it's the social interaction that occurs at work. It's that engagement. It's the learning. It's the sharing of experience. That's the reason why retention is so good when you have older people in the workforce. It's because younger people love to work with the older people because they learn from them. And hopefully if the older people are willing to share, which usually they are, what can give you more pleasure than to share your secrets, with somebody else? So there's a lot of evidence that shows how important that is. And where, work, in my opinion, work would translate into diminished costs for healthcare, for financial support for older people, with mental, cognition, all sorts of issues would be resolved if people were able to do what they wanted to do. But really, ageism stands in the way, their own beliefs and the beliefs of others.
Well, I can't help but think that the retirement industry has promoted this idea that you're supposed to kick back and enjoy the golden years. But rarely do I see that as being the ultimate experience. I'm motivated by a wonderful piece that was written by the great Spanish cellist Pablo Casals called A Salute to Life. And he said, on my next birthday, I will be 92 years of age. That's not young, of course, but age is a relative matter. And he said, every morning I get up and I go to the piano and I play 2 passages and fugues of Bach and Beethoven, and every day I discover something exciting, enriching, and rewarding in the music. And this speaks to what you say about purpose. When you are working towards something, you feel like you are a contributor to the society that you live in.
Exactly. And that's what we're being denied regularly because we're considered too old and COVID hasn't helped with the prejudice against getting old, because the people who we saw on television were all vulnerable, needy, and in critical condition. Purpose will add 7.5 years of your life to your life. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, let's get out there and fight this stigma that's known as ageism and tell people that it's not acceptable, both individually and from a employer and corporate perspective. Helen, thanks for your time today.
My pleasure, Stuart. Thank you.